Welcome to Optimus Minimus, a historical channel where we put history in the historical perspective, so we could learn history from history. And today we're gonna talk about the pharaohs of Egypt. Everyone loves top 5, top 10 and top 20 lists. But this list is not quite what you think it is. It is about changing the perception and fighting with the stereotypes. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Here's our top 5 pharaohs of Egypt. Okay, one more short introduction. History of ancient Egypt is a mess. Strictly speaking, we know little to nothing about a good half of the ancient pharaohs, and about the other half we know even less. It is a world of romanticized stories for pseudo-historical novels. Only later periods of pharaonic Egypt become more or less coherent. Only there we get some sort of a more or less verifiable information and a narrative that makes sense. This video is not about, Ramses or Tutankhamun with his golden mask. It's about objectively great pharaohs that shaped history itself. The pharaohs of which we have some actual information, not just legends and a couple of inscriptions here and there. So, number 5. Darius the Great. You might say that Darius was a king of Persia. That is correct. But he also was the pharaoh of Egypt. He wasn't the first Persian ruler who conquered Egypt, it was Cambyses, currently known as Cambyses II, to distinguish him from the other people with this name. But Darius was a far more important historical figure. They didn't call him the Great for nothing. Darius claimed he was a descendant of Achaemenes, and at the time of internal struggle, sparked by the death of Cambyses II, managed to take power and suppress the revolts in the Persian Empire. Then he retook Egypt, that for a couple of years was controlled by the rebel pharaoh Petubastis, and effectively secured Persian control over Egypt for more than a century. That's a lot. Our perception of time is greatly distorted by the history books, especially books on ancient history. But there were 4 generations between the moment Darius I, our guy, became a pharaoh, and the death of Darius II something like 120 years later. That's when the Persian rule was interrupted, the same year when Peloponnesian War ended. But Persians retook Egypt once again a few decades later. Only Darius III, 200 years after Darius the Great, kind of screwed up big time, and Egypt was snatched by number 4 of our list. This is where you see that we place our pharaohs chronologically. Our number 4 is Alexander the Great. They don't usually put it in the pseudo-historical movies, but Alexander conquered Egypt as well. The priests hailed him as a god and a son of a god, which only confirmed Alexander's suspicions. He always felt there was something divine about him. It's always nice when people are absolutely on the same page with you and treat you the way they should. Alexander ruled Egypt for almost a decade, and I hate to be obvious, but he founded Alexandria. He founded many Alexandrias, but this one, Egyptian one, later became one of the most prominent cities in the world, and also the place where he was buried. Over time, his hometown, his capital in Macedon, became nothing more than a village and then a pile of bricks. But Alexandria is still there. It is a home to some 5 million people, although it's nothing compared to what it used to be in terms of significance. Alexander hadn't spent much time in Egypt. He was a busy man, and his main focus was mostly Mesopotamia and crushing the Persians in their home country, which he did. He failed to establish a functioning dynasty and probably never really cared much about things like that. After his death, his empire was divided by his friends and family, who actually killed Alexander's son in the process. And Egypt was picked up by our number 3, Ptolemy the Savior, also known as Ptolemy I Soter. The Ptolemies obviously haven't used the numbers like first or second, and there were lots of Ptolemies. They were everywhere. For nearly 3 centuries, all of the male pharaohs that came after Ptolemy I were called Ptolemies as well. All of them were his direct descendants. Ptolemy was the founder of ancient Egypt as we know it. I mean, literally as we know it, since this is the period where we have most of the written information. This is Hellenistic Egypt, although the Egyptian heartland never really became truly Hellenized. The country was ruled from the Greek city of Alexandria, or Alexandria by Egypt, meaning that Alexandria wasn't really in this country, it was nearby. You need to leave the city limits of Alexandria to actually get to Egypt. Ptolemy, for the Greeks, was pretty much a typical, although extremely rich and powerful, Greek king. And for the Egyptians, he was presented as a typical Egyptian god king. That was the concept they understood very well. But you couldn't call yourself a god in front of a Macedonian or Greek crowd. It is like publicly declaring yourself an insane Eastern despot. As with previous rulers of Egypt, who were not quite ethnic Egyptians, Ptolemy was sitting atop of the proven mechanism of control, the priests. They worked in this capacity for many centuries, they were effective, and regardless of who was on top, for them it was more or less business as usual. The pharaoh could be a native, he could be a Persian king, he could be a Macedonian/Greek, he even could be from Mars. They had one river to control, and they had all the infrastructure in place. Later, the Ptolemies did a lot of interesting things apart from just controlling the Nile. Ptolemy the Savior was quite good at this as well. First of all, he vanquished everyone who tried to take his domain away from him. He also founded the Library of Alexandria. And he was a father to nice children who loved each other a lot. Like, really a lot. Number 3. A descendant of Ptolemy. Cleopatra. Or more formally, Cleopatra the 7th Philopator. There were lots of Cleopatras, like Ptolemies, swarms of them. And yeah, it is generally believed she was Cleopatra number 7, or maybe 6, because Cleopatra number 6 was probably at the same time number 5. It's all messed up. Historians are not quite sure. As you probably know, there are 3 types of people: those who know how to count and those who don't. Some of the historians and writers say stuff like Cleopatra was the last true pharaoh of Egypt. Well, define true then. It's like saying that Ronald Reagan was the last true president of the United States because no reason. What about people who came after him? Not true enough. Maybe I just don't like people who play saxophone and people who have British grunge band for a last name. So no, there were pharaohs after her. There were pretty much official 100% legit pharaohs. They were accepted as such by the priests and, well, everyone. And they obviously were depicted as pharaohs. Despite the fact that Cleopatra became a very strange character of fiction, it seems that indeed she was an important player in the world politics of her time. And she was probably more capable than people give her credit. Well, based on all of these films and stories about her relationships with Caesar and Mark Antony. Cleopatra ruled Egypt for 20 years, displaced her brother and co-ruler, and then constantly tried to interfere in the politics of all of the surrounding territories, including the politics of the emerging superpower, Rome. Egypt was #1 agricultural country in the world, and it was filthy rich. Cleopatra gave money left and right and tried to manipulate everyone for the benefit of her country. And given the circumstances, she was mostly quite successful. She used Caesar to cement her power and influence, and declared her son as Caesar's successor. During the civil war, she probably gave aid to both sides, Octavian Antony and Cassius Brutus. Later, she had to explain herself to the winners. Then she sided with Mark Antony and continued her scheming, retaking the Syrian territories in the process. So Egypt effectively controlled more territory under Cleopatra than before she became a queen. It all ended not very well for her, but when she lost her power and her life, Egypt prospered under the man who replaced her and her dynasty. And so we move to our #1, arguably the greatest and best pharaoh in all of the history of Egypt. Augustus. Also known as Octavian, or Gaius Julius Caesar Octavian, or whatever. Augustus replaced Cleopatra and her son Ptolemy Caesar as the pharaoh of Egypt. We all know the outline of the story, although some of its parts sound quite weird and, once again, very romanticized, which kind of hides the real behind-the-scenes politics of that time. Obviously, it makes little sense to give here the brief summary of the political career of Augustus, but I'd like to stress one interesting aspect. So here's the thing. In Rome, Augustus was a princeps, the first citizen of Rome, and the father of the fatherland. He also occupied different official posts, like he was elected to council 13 times. But in Egypt, he was the pharaoh. And Egypt, in fact, wasn't really a province of Rome at the time. It was a personal domain of Augustus. And I ask you to think about it for another minute or so. Imagine a guy who is running for the President of the United States of America and gives all these nice hypocritical speeches about democracy and stuff. At the same time, this very person is the absolute monarch of one of the richest countries in the world. I know it's legally impossible for a member of a royal house to run for the US presidency, but just imagine that. Imagine the world where the main candidates in the US elections are Donald Trump and Queen Elizabeth II. And Her Majesty actually wins. This is Rome under Augustus. Augustus the Pharaoh. If you have something to say about all of this, I strongly encourage you to leave a comment or two. Also, don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and, well, you can rewatch this video 5 times, or 10 times at double speed. So thanks for watching and rewatching, and see you soon!